Good morning, aloha. Everybody say aloha. Awesome. So my name is Sage Kealohilani Quiamno. I always like to lead in with that because I'm a native Hawaiian. I'm a proud native Hawaiian woman from the island of Oahu. If some of you guys have been, it's gorgeous. Not what outside, but it's okay. So I'm super excited to talk about inclusivity, inclusion. There are hot topics, hot tops. I'm excited to talk about that. Let me get this slide over here. So let's see. I'm so glad. Can we give another round of applause to the Creative Mornings team, guys? Holy crap. I'm just saying right now, it is so hard to do events. As humans, I think we're just always craving like community and human interaction. We are in tech, we are in creatives, and sometimes we just don't interact anymore. Let's be real, especially in Seattle. So I'm excited for that. Ooh, so can somebody help me with my slides? Anybody? Volunteer? Thank you. Thank you, David. How you guys feeling today? Good, I know. I'm just trying to get all the energy up. I'm big, I'm really short, so people in the back, sorry about that. This is actually a karaoke, Friday karaoke session. Perfect. Getting in this. We're doing a live streaming too. So my co-founder and partner Ray and I met a year ago, and we knew that we needed a community for women of color professionals. As you know, in Seattle, we are diverse, but we do not have diversity, equity, inclusion in most spaces. And women of color face one of the most challenging barriers in the workplace. So that's when we decided to join forces and create Future for Us. Follow us, do our thing. Follow us on Instagram at futureforus.now. We would appreciate that. I work hard on the Instagram, so. And that's a little bit about me. That's my Instagram handle. Hello. So what is Future for Us? Future for Us is a platform dedicated to advancing women of color at work through community, culture, and career development. Community as in we host 3 events, one specifically for women of color, but also the other 2 for allies and champions. I'm sure a lot of you guys are out there trying to figure out, well, how do I become a better ally? How do I become a better champion for others? And so that's why we created what we're doing. We also have a big conference coming up in April. So this is our badass community of women of color, lots of diversity, and we launched January 17th, guys. Oof. And it's been a wild ride since. So guess what? We're gonna be a little social today, yes. So it's gonna be your turn. Turn to somebody who you haven't met. I want you guys to say your name, what your career is. What is the one thing you want to get out of this discussion? And finish the sentence. I want to be more inclusive because X. So I think hopefully some of you guys in the back can see the screen. But there's 3 questions. So please turn to somebody you don't know, introduce yourselves and answer the questions. Now I want everybody, sorry for cutting your conversations. I'm sure you guys are like, yeah. So I really want you guys to take out your phones. If you have the LinkedIn app or have a LinkedIn, please share and connect with the person you just met. It's a nice little trick, y'all. It's a nice little trick. If you don't have a LinkedIn, I highly suggest you get one, but of course, not forcing you guys to get one, but please connect, please connect. All right, guys, I hope you guys pressed that connect button on LinkedIn. I hope you guys connected. You guys are all on there. Bring it back, yes. Awesome. I want to bring up to the stage one brave soul to introduce themselves and answer the questions because Future for Us is about passing the mic and passing power around, and I want somebody to pitch themselves and talk a little bit. Anybody? Real quick? Come on. Oh, there you go, girl. Yes.
I admit this is a pretty cool view, so I'm glad you took a moment. I'm taking a moment as well. So good morning, everyone. My name is Ana Parada. I'm originally from Mexico, but I've been in Seattle for 20 years.
Yes.
I just recently started a new role at Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center, and I am part of the diversity and inclusion team. And so the reason I'm here is because diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that's really on the forefront right now. And I can speak from my lived experiences, being a person that belongs to a lot of different groups, often underrepresented groups of folks in the room. But at the same time, I'm also a learner, and I need to continue to develop and make sure that when I am doing a presentation, or I'm truly trying to embody this idea that I am really being proactive at it. And so taking into consideration that I also have a lot of learning to do, and then giving myself grace. So I'm really excited to be here and to be able to be in a room full of folks who are truly doing the work and taking it seriously and being advocates for this work. So.
Yay, awesome. Thank you so much, Anna. It's so funny because she followed me on Instagram. I finally met her in real life, so let's talk about community right there. That's awesome. So the truth is that inclusion is a daily habit, guys. It's a daily habit. And it's hard with habits. It's like you have to proactively and intentionally have inclusion in mind. And it's a big deal. It's a big deal when you feel like you have to, when we talk about inclusion, and when you're working with your team or even in your personal life, you have to take an audit at the table and see who's not represented here. Because it's not only is inclusion, diversity, equity, inclusion just the right thing to do, but it's a business case. And a lot of everyone's nodding head. There's a lot of posts and articles about that right now. And I think it's when we talk about Anna, her own stories, that a lot of POCs, a lot of people of color, it's like our job to be heading these initiatives in companies, and we need all of us. We need all of us to be caring about this topic. And we can talk about diversity a little bit. So diversity means being invited to the dance, and inclusion is being asked to dance. So when you're really thinking about diversity, it's about asking somebody to come out with you for a beer, right? But it's like, okay, but can we have an actual discussion with each other? And that's kind of how we think about diversity and inclusion. And every day we choose people, right? And it's kind of like that tribalism. It's like you want to hang out with people who look like you, have the same culture as you. And there is a need for that. But if you look and take audit of your friends, even looking at the people around you, do they look like you? Do they have the same thought process? Do they have from the same culture? And it's really pushing the barriers of how can I put myself out there? How can I be comfortable with being uncomfortable? I know it's an unsettling feeling. Even being on stage, like I speak all the time, but it's still very uncomfortable to put myself as a Hawaiian girl from the middle of the Pacific Ocean to be here in Seattle in the continental US. It's very nerve-wracking. I had an accent before, and I really had to take some speech and debate classes and really get that accent out because I don't know how people are going to perceive me, right? Because like an underlining message is that if you have an accent, you're less intelligent, right? And that unfortunately sometimes happens. But right now we're really focusing on what is authentic to yourself and what's something that you're able to compromise. Should be doing this. So yeah, truth is that inclusion is a daily habit and choice. Yeah, so why does inclusion matter? That's a big one. And because we're correcting social inequities in society, some people have more access than others, and we'll talk about a little bit about that. Did anybody here, do you guys know this woman? Who run the world? Girls. So this was big in the news I think last week, where Reebok, because there's a big thing about like new athletic wear coming back, right? I got a Fila sweatshirt. Like for the 90s kids out there and 80s kids. Basically, so Reebok was pitching Beyonce to do a product line with her. And they sat there, I think it was like 15 people in a boardroom, and they said, like, what do you think, right? And Beyonce just turned to them and said, is this the team? Is this the team working on my product? And she looked around the room and said, nobody is my skin color, nobody is from my background, nobody is my target demographic. And she rejected Reebok, and that's the power, right? Is to take a look and say, hey, you need to be diverse. You need to diversify your team. Now she's working with Adidas, but that was a big moment of, like, we need to be talking about this. This needs, hiring and retaining diverse talent is imperative, especially when the demographic here in the US are changing. And for this, it's a business case. So Beyonce kind of took that over. That was really big news. We put it all over the place. So we learned a lot of things along the way when I built Future for Us, is that we have 3 different topics. So inclusion means trying something new and leading with curiosity. So this is a big deal when you're talking, for instance, the head of Zillow, his name is Lionel Lee. He's a bomb guy who has been really leading diversity, equity, inclusion at Zillow. And their exec team is all older white males. And what he did was and they found a problem where they were only hiring people from Ivy League school backgrounds, people who had the pedigree or whatever, whatever that means. So he brought the entire executive team to Afrotech. Has anybody heard of Afrotech? Basically, it's a tech conference predominantly for POCs, African American tech innovators, and startup founders. So he brought the entire executive team to that conference. And that was the first time they ever felt uncomfortable, because they were the only white guys in a conference. And that's what POCs feel like every day, usually. And settling into that uncomfortableness, but realizing, hey, this is a talent pool that I am missing out on. They didn't graduate from Harvard or Stanford, but these are the people who have grinded and provided resources and starting their own companies. And that was a big moment of thinking, when you're in your company, what can I do to really push diversity, equity, inclusion? So thinking about that and being curious. Second is inclusion means being uncomfortable. And that's what we're saying, is that how do you make yourself uncomfortable? How do you push yourself outside the norm? We have a great group of women at Future for Us, and it's always, we had a 19-year-old intern who said that this is the first time she ever felt seen, and that's huge, and that's really huge. And she's Muslim and Ethiopian, and she was just flabbergasted, wow, this is a community that feels like it means more. So inclusion means being uncomfortable. Next is inclusion means amplifying, even if their voices are different. So I have a story where my friend is the creator and host of Balanced Black Girl. It's a podcast to redefine what self-care is supposed to be like, because it's white dominant. And what happened is that I don't have the experience of a black woman, right? But I still promote her stuff because how do you amplify others? And think about that, really write that down. How can I help somebody else that I have no experience in their stories? And that's really, really, really huge and important. All right, we're gonna talk about power, position, power, and privilege, guys. So who's always been curious about how I become a better ally? This is everybody. I hope everybody raise their hands. We, as women of color, I think we always have the question but Sage, how can I be a better ally to you? And it takes a lot of education and also looking inwards of, what can I do? Because it's always leaning on POCs and women of color to kind of educate, but it's not our job to educate. It's a lot of the times, how do you find that education yourself? But everybody has some form of privilege and power and position. Even I, as a Native Hawaiian woman, I come from a working class family. I still have privilege to be out here, because a lot of kids in Hawaii cannot come out here to live and death their life. So everybody has some kind of form of privilege. The first level is advocate. So an advocate is somebody who is, it's a low-level allyship where you kind of just promote it, say it, but there's no risk in it. So you're somebody who's just absorbing, understanding what it means, diversity, equity, inclusion, going out to different communities. That's an advocate. Second is an ally. So an ally is I used to have this coworker. His name was Dan. He rocked New Balances and traded Bitcoin and loved March Madness and white cisgender male. Me and him, we had a really great relationship because we all like to poke fun at each other. And then we bonded, and we basically, in team meetings, if somebody didn't hear me, when I'm talking about a project and I'm piloting a project and nobody would hear me in that group, he would say, that's a great idea, Sage. Let's talk about it more. That's an ally. Somebody who's going to put your idea forward, who's going to push you and represent you, and that's another level. The third would be a sponsor. Does anybody have a sponsor in this room? Anybody going to leadership? No. But basically, a sponsor is somebody who is going to champion you, who has decision-making capabilities. So this is somebody who's more on the exact higher level, who's going to champion you behind closed doors. So when you are not in the room, this person is going to take you to the next level and for leadership. So that's a sponsor. And if you are trying to ascend into leadership, you must get a sponsor. Carla Harris, the VP at managing partner at Morgan Stanley said this. It's like, if you want to ascend to leadership, you have to get a sponsor. And how to attract a sponsor is basically performing at your level, but a percentage higher, but also developing your network around you. So that's a good way of being a part of that. And the next one is conspirator. So this is somebody who is actively trying to help you get to the next level. And that's actually putting risk on yourself. You're risking your reputation for this person, to advocate for this person at the highest levels. So think about that. On the spectrum, what are you right now and where do you want to be? And we could talk about this a little bit later, but this is just huge. Like, how do you use your position, power, and privilege to help somebody who is marginalized in different communities and at your workplace? And at the end of the day, too, if you do well, we all do well. Like, be better human beings. Even in our own communities, especially where we're women of color, we have a lot to work to do. And for us, it's like, if you do well, we do well. And I want to challenge you guys, really challenge you guys to think about inclusivity and how are you practicing that every day. Whether it's taking out the new employee at lunch for lunch, whether it's inviting somebody new to go out to watch a movie. There's all these different types of ways to champion for somebody, and inclusivity is that. It's really huge. I already cut this really quick, but yeah, so any questions? This is a Q&A session. Everybody good? Don't be shy. Everybody. Anybody? Yep. Here you go.
Can you give some more examples of what allyship might look like besides the really good anecdote you provided about your coworker?
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe professional context or somebody who doesn't work with you at the moment?
Yeah. So for instance, another example of allyship is that going out to different communities. There's tons of communities here in Seattle. And allyship means getting uncomfortable, right? And going out to something that you might typically not particularly go to. Like for instance, Future for Us, we have open events for allies. You come in and we do unconscious bias training. And that's something you can do as an ally, is that how do I train my unconscious bias? Because we all have unconscious bias. And doing that work is being an ally. So being able to do trainings, even management, reaching out to different community leaders, that's allyship. So really getting outside of your normal social groups or professional networking groups and reach out, and even different industries. Like this is cross-sector organizations are just, being able to make friends outside of your own sphere is huge. So that's another example. Anybody else? Oh, of course, Denise.
I'm curious to know, what is your advice for companies that say they cannot find a diverse pool of talent to hire?
Oh, the pipeline issue. Some of you guys might be recruiters or HR managers. When a company says that there's not enough diverse talent, that is complete BS, first and foremost. So let's get that one straight. For that, recruiters and HR managers, it's their job to go out in the communities and really find these talent. And that means going to Latinos in Tech, it's Here Seattle, it's Future for Us. And it's really beyond going on LinkedIn. I think what recruiters and HR managers do is that they go on LinkedIn and that's all they find. But diverse candidates, they might not have the keyword search, you have to, on LinkedIn, have the correct verbiage, not only on your resume, but also on LinkedIn for them to see it. So it's really getting out there in the community, but also doing partnerships with national organizations, and also how are we recruiting? What does the job description look like? Are we doing it, is it bilingual? Who are we looking for? So it's really huge when somebody is like, oh, there's a pipeline, there's an issue, we can't find the talent. And like, there's a lot of talent. You just need to revisit what your hiring practices are. And Future for Us does that as well. Awesome. Anybody else? Oh, in the back. Yes. Oh, help me. There we go.
Do you have any coaching or advice for allies who swing out to support their colleagues or to have a conversation about inclusion, and then they step in it because they're uncomfortable and they're taking a risk, just like everybody else is, to clean that up so that you can then return to a safe space? Anything you have to say about that?
Return to a safe space as in, sorry, I'm trying to clarify.
As in, if you have asked for, if you've tried to swing out and saying like, who's not at the table, or bringing up an issue about race, and it's not your race, and you accidentally said something offensive, that's not a safe space anymore. So do you have any coaching or advice for people who are not of color, who have accidentally been offensive, they recognize that, and they want to clean that up?
Yeah.
Does that make better sense? Okay.
Totally. Ooh, that question, guys. Ooh, Ray's uncomfortable. Yeah, so we all screw up in some kind of form. Even POCs, we screw up in some kind of form. But really to de-escalate that is just to really look inwards and also, number one, apologize, right? Like it's simply apologizing. And then, extending an olive branch to say, hey, what I said was not acceptable. Here are the ways that I'm trying to revert that, and I hope that we can somehow work together still. And I think it takes a lot of, when somebody apologizes to me, that is huge. We understand how much it takes for that, but also doing the work of really, really, how can I support you? And it's hearing. I think Oprah says that people get into arguments because they feel like they're not heard. And I think it's saying that I heard you, and what I said was offensive. Let me rebuild this relationship. And I think when you come with that, being genuine and authentic, I think people can feel that. And that's a huge learning moment. We're all learning. We have this huge learning curve, and I think that's how you kind of handle that. And if they do not take that apology, then that's on them, right? So being able to move on from that relationship, but moving forward of, now I know what I need to say and how I come off. And that's kind of communication, like 101. It gets really sticky sometimes, but I think people really just try to understand that, and they see that. Because we all screwed up in some kind of form, we all did. But thank you. Awesome. Anyone else? Oh, in the back. Yes. I got you the mic. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so two-part question.
Yeah.
First part being what made you start this company and foundation, and then the second is kind of like looking more like macro in Seattle. Like, what are the big hurdles you think we need to overcome, even outside the workplace, to improve diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, awesome. Oh man, why did we start Future for Us? So as a young woman of color, so I just turned 28, and I think, that's my birthday. So I saw, as a young woman of color, my own challenges in my career. I had a boss who told me that I was intimidating. I was like, am I intimidating or are you intimidated? I don't know. It's kind of weird. And I think as women of color, we internalize that feedback because Seattle's very passive. But how do you get that passive feedback and not take it personally, but also, really turn that into something that's going to be beneficial for your career? My background is I used to work at Amazon, a couple startups. Then I got, after 2016, women's organizations because I believe in that. But the feminist space is predominantly white. And there's not enough space for women of color. If you guys see speaking engagements and there's a panel, there's usually one woman of color and she doesn't get the mic. She never gets to speak. And they don't really, it's not cognizant of that, right? And I think for me, I'm an Aries, so I'm very you piss me off, I'm like, I'm gonna start a company, let's go. That shouldn't be the reason, but I'm trying to be honest here. But basically, it's I knew that women of color were craving this community of being heard. Our stories are horrendous. like horrendous stories of being pushed out, politically pushed out, mistreated, discriminated against for their hair. You know what I mean? And stuff is happening today, in 2019. And we had to do something about it. So that's why we created Future for Us. I'm so passionate about this. This is something, a legacy of mine that I want to, like, if I could cultivate and develop the next Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the next Oprah, the next Michelle Obama, like all the Stacey Abrams, like if I could be a part of that and cultivating that leadership, then my job is done, you know what I mean? And I want to pass this on to the next, because what we do, I think our ego gets in front of us and we're like, oh, I'm gonna hold on to this power. It's like, no, let it go. I'm not gonna speak in Seattle ever again after this year because I speak too much times, but it's understanding like, hey, this is my time, now my time has passed, let's do something else. In terms of like what we can do in Seattle is change leadership, right? The wonderful thing about Creative Mornings is that they had a committee and they voted, and they make sure that there's diversity within their speakers lineup. Making sure that at the table there are diverse people with different backgrounds. That's important. It all starts at leadership. We can only do so much at the community level, because that's what I'm doing is the community level. But how do we change the top? And how do we advocate for that? It's making sure the right people at the right table and taking that risk as an ally, being like, hey, this wonderful person needs to be at that table and make the decisions. I know Louise is here. He's another big guy. If you guys don't know Louise, he's been always advocating for diverse speakers, especially in Seattle. But if we keep having the same people every time, it is not gonna push us to think more innovative, right? Like it's not gonna do that. And we can talk a little bit more about that later. Oh, all the way in the back. There we go.
I think what you're saying is super powerful and really awesome, and I'm loving it. And a question I kind of have, or I guess I have a question that when you're working through all this inclusivity stuff, how do you measure the impact of what you're doing? I just think inclusivity is such a difficult space to navigate in terms of being like, well, what are you really doing, or what's changing? So I'm just kind of curious how you measure the impact of what you and your organization are doing.
Yeah, the ROI. What's the KPI? What's on the ROC? Wah. I always get that. Even because my co-founder and I pitched 100+ times since December, y'all. And pitching as 2 women of color for some capital has been, hard. Because you have to prove the metrics, because we're in a capitalist society, we're in business, what's the business case? How is it proving, if I'm recruiting diverse talent, is it really contributing to the bottom line? Studies have shown if you have diverse teams from different backgrounds, they have been proving doubling basically their measuring. So they're basically their bottom line. So there's research on that. You can Google it. How to measure it? At the end of the day, if there's a company that's more diverse, the better it is for other people. And measuring that is just keeping track of who's in, how much people are getting paid, at what level, who are we promoting, right? See, there's a lot of like controversial stuff right now where the data is like, not that diverse. And for that is that you really need to understand the programming about it, but ROI is basically, is it going to convert to our talent? Is our team happier? Is it more productive? And studies have shown if you have a diverse team, innovation happens.
Sorry, I'm just going to rephrase that question. So, not about other organizations, but like yourself, like what you're doing with your team, like if there's something that happens, you're like, yes, you did it, like what are those things where you're like, yeah, our organization did something, we're so proud of it? Like I'm just kind of curious what some of those things are.
Totally. Some of our, as Future for Us, oh my gosh. So we are like, 3-month company right now. And right now we are at a base level community. So we have events, we do consulting, so we do diversity, equity, inclusion training, we do restructuring of organizations. So that's another metric, is that not only are we taking surveys of the women that are at our community, but we're also doing consulting at company levels. We are thinking about 3 different business models. One is going to be a data company where we collect data of women of color professionals, so we can write really great studies on it. 2 would be a hiring enablement company. So something, because I have 100+ job postings from companies who are like, we want women of color. I'm like, cool, but you need to be reaching out and be more proactive as well. And then 3, maybe possibly a media company. For like, there's Blavity. I don't know if you've heard of Blavity, but they're pretty dope. So being able to, as a 3-month company, we are just starting, and that's the biggest thing, is just trying. Like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is just trying. And I think that's the first step. If the guys of Instagram could just develop a photo scrolling app so we can build communities. So that's kind of our background. We can talk a little bit more about Future for Us as well. Oh, in the back. Are we good on time too? Making sure. Hi.
Thank you. Inclusivity, to me, covers, like as you said, being invited to the dance and then being asked to dance. How does ageism fit into this? Because as an older person, I've been invited to the dance, and I'm not invited to dance at all.
Yeah.
And there's many like me that are that have a lot to say, a lot to contribute, a lot of energy, and a lot of experience that can really add to the end result and affect the ROI.
Yeah. Oh, ageism is a huge one. Thank you so much for sharing that. So inclusivity in terms of ageism is that making sure that, older professionals are at the table as well. I think there's a really tricky connection between that, because even as a 28-year-old founder, a lot of older, I'm gonna be real, like a lot of older women don't want to talk to me because I'm still young. And then it's that communication and being asked to dance and like really bonding and getting together, and how do we have those voices heard? I mean, especially when you are older. And I think Seattle too, there's a lot of ageism happening in Seattle. And culturally for me, we respect people who are older than us. Like that is one of our values. In terms of like, how do we push that boundary? Because there is definitely older organizations and there's younger organizations. And for us, it's being cognizant of that. For instance, my co-founder, Aparna, she's like in her mid-30s. And her and I are a great yin and yang team because we bring in both different talents and insight. She's more on the academic side, I'm more on the PR marketing and branding and community building. So being able to show that, like we can work together and create some really great programming and community, that's a huge one. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's really important when we talk about inclusion. It's ageism too, disabilities, LGBTQI community. I'm always thinking about how do I reach out to trans women of color, because that's not my community. I need to learn a little bit more, and that's the biggest thing is about educating yourself and having coffee and really extending that relationship. I'm big on relationships. I love just getting out there and meeting somebody else and hearing their story. But we don't really take the time anymore to learn people's stories. Where you grew up, how like where did you go, all that good stuff. I think we have to take that time now to really build those relationships. Thank you.
What advice do you give for young women and women of color who are starting to work in like big companies, and for them to be able to kind of have their voice be heard by like higher ups and people without fearing of like losing their job or jeopardizing their career?
Good question. I just met Serena. She's an intern at Element. So awesome. And I see you in I see myself in you, and it's just tremendous. Like you being here is huge. So when you want to be more boisterous and people respect you at your level, it's about performing what is asked of you and a little bit higher. So that's performance currency, and the next currency is your personal currency. Personal currency is the investment in the team around you, and that's going to attract a sponsor that's going to help you. So like exactly getting back to the sponsors, that you need somebody, especially when you're one of color or a woman, is that you need somebody to kind of help you navigate not only just a corporate space or agency space, but also like a white dominant space. Like you need somebody to kind of train you on how to make decisions and what battles to choose. I think all of us, we get to a point where like, I love Oprah. So Oprah is saying like, one of your biggest questions is like, how do you, what bridges to build and which bridges to burn, because it's basically choosing what battles you want to have in your life. And that's something that's key. All the way in the back. I feel like I'm in the hot seat.
So thank you. The part of your presentation that resonated the most is the question of our own personal lives. Just not at work, but in your own personal life, who's sitting at your table, and what are some practical tips in your own life to start diversity?
Yeah.
To include people at your personal table.
Yeah. Yeah, this one is huge. You know, it all starts at the table, right? It all starts at the dinner table, and being able to share culture and stories. I think when you take an audit of your friends and your close friends and your community, you realize, like, if they look like you, they think like you, then you have to really get outside of that. I made a conscious decision last year to make sure that my friends are different from me and share different stories and backgrounds. A tip is to really go out there and start community, go to these networking events, right? And strike up a conversation. It's easy as that. I mean, it's hard being social, so I get it. But really extending, like, hey, you are doing this, and I have these resources to help you. Would you like any support in that? I love doing that when I see somebody who's like, I'm starting this new thing, and they don't have the resources that I have access to, and I say, hey, I do this. Here you go. And then that kind of shares, like, that bond. Instead of just getting coffee and talking, you know, for like 30 minutes, it's like, how can I help you and serve you? And I think that's inviting somebody to your house, right, and having a dinner. It's so personal. There's a founder here, Michaela Ayers, and she hosts these dinners called Nourish. Look it up, it's Nourish. She has a dinner, she does curated dinners to talk about race. You know, and that really is good because you share a meal, and that's the most intimate thing, is like sharing a meal and sharing stories. So if you really, that's one thing. So look her up. Her name is Michaela Ayers, Nourish, and you just pay for dinner and you meet people from different backgrounds, and that's one thing you can do. Yeah, gotta promote. Gotta promote my other girls.
Do you think that moving from Hawaii or moving from a place that you grew up kind of has contributed to your understanding of diversity and inclusion? And I guess just how so, if so?
Yeah, moving from Hawaii was, oof, that was huge. Because being from Hawaiian culture, it's very communal. I'm sure some cultures can relate. And coming from a communal environment to a very individual environment, and that has contributed, because I didn't recognize myself as a woman of color, to be honest, in Hawaii, because everybody kind of looks like me. So that's a really good thing that we had in one of our events, is that when did you recognize that you were different or other? So that kind of like woke me up, where I'm like, oh my gosh, I came to Seattle and I'm like, there's nobody that kind of looks like me. So that kind of opened my eyes and really helped me think about diversity, equity, inclusion on a macro level. Like, oh, this is Seattle metropolitan area, and it's different when it's South Seattle, North Seattle, East Side. And how do we work for that? How do we create communities so we can share stories? As a Native Hawaiian, like, that is all, like, we dance hula, we chant, like, that's a part of our storytelling, and we don't do enough of that. So being from Hawaii, coming here really woke me up in terms of understanding that I am different than others. And how I got over that was reaching out to community. I used to be so isolated. I'm sure, who's a transplant to Seattle? Holy crap. There's no native Seattleites, oh my God. So get a native Seattleite friend, find them, they're there, don't worry. They really exist, I'm telling you. And learning from their history, it will blow your mind. I have friends who their family was all Central District. So African American families, back in the day, like, that's where their families grew up, but now they're gone. And learning that history, even the Duwamish tribe. The Duwamish tribe, we're on native land. Oh, thank you. See, we have a Native American woman here. But it's being able to hear that history. We don't really get to, as transplants, we all gravitate towards each other. We're like, oh my God, it's raining here. Like, nobody likes me. Because, like, it's true. Like, we all have this, we're cut from the same cloth because we're new to Seattle. And we are kind of longing for where we used to be from. But it's also getting outside of your comfort zone and who lives here, who has a family here, right? And learning that really gave me a good grasp about Seattle's history. And that made me more committed to staying here for a little bit. But either way, I'm really dedicated to this community. Yep. It's a long one. Here, guys. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. So on the pipeline question, you mentioned that the ones that we want to include might not be very visible to the people who are looking. It seems to me like the system starts pushing that invisibility when you're really young. Hide what makes you diverse. My dad used to have a lathe in his wood shop. It was where you take a piece of wood with all these knots and twists, and you put it into this machine, and then you grind off everything that makes it unique until you get this smooth table leg that looks like all the others. That was my son's experience in public school, was they just sanded off all the parts that were unique. How do we, it's like that. How do we cope with that? It trains people not to show up unless they look like me, you know, they're white guys. It just befuddles me. How do you cope with that?
Oh, how do we cope with that, dude? how do people of color deal with coping with colonialism, you know, historically? Like, $1 million question. Lots of therapy. Lots of therapy. But like, when we talk about that, it's code switching. It's self-preservation. For instance, I'm in my best Meghan Markle look for y'all today. But if I was back in Hawaii, I'd be rocking my tank top and shorts and slippers, or you guys call it flip-flops out here. But it's like, how do you, it's such a hard question, because I think women of color, POCs, it's like we are in a white dominant space. And for an ally or an advocate or a co-conspirator is to really think about this person, like, if they have an accent, is it my responsibility for them to change? No, it's for you to learn their accent and receive them as they are, because they still bring a lot to the table. They wouldn't be hired. So the uniqueness, how we can cultivate that uniqueness and have people feel comfortable. There's a data point that 44% of women of color feel like they can't be themselves at work. Wow, you know, that's crazy. Women of color make 20% of the US, but take 50% of low-wage jobs. You know, like, that is crazy to me. How do we show up authentically? How do we cultivate an environment that's equitable so people can feel like they can express themselves correctly? For instance, if I want to bring kimchi to lunch, I'm not going to get a microaggression from my coworker, right? And that's being like holding yourself back. You can be curious in a way that is productive and conducive and helpful, but we don't really think about that in the workplace. You know, like, for a lot of women, don't touch my hair. You know, like, just don't. That's a big thing, but it's your education to, like, listen. Like, that's why consuming different media is great. Like, going on a podcast and really understanding another person's experience is huge. Traveling, reading books, consuming the right media to give you that perspective. How do you get outside your perspective is huge. So that's one way. But cultivating an environment that people feel like they can share is something that's great. And also, like, recognizing the uniqueness and telling them how great they are in their uniqueness is another thing. Being validated and heard is huge. Like, I had a boss tell me I smiled too much. And I was like, how do I train myself not to smile? So I think I can go on all day about what kind of crazy stuff has been done. But, you know, it's really opening up that conversation. And yeah, it's just, that's a big question right there. Nobody tweet that. Anybody else? Oh. Time for one more question. Right here, gentleman here. Ooh, sorry.
Hello. So I moved to Seattle like 2 years ago from LA. The first thing I noticed was, like, everything here is super passive. Super passive. And I was wondering, for your company, would you have you thought of, like, creating some sort of, like, service to allow people who are comfortable or uncomfortable becoming more, assertive, and to kind of like enable that outcome. Like maybe like for the homeless situation in Seattle, a lot of people complain about it, but no one does anything about it. So maybe creating some sort of like service that'll bring people outside to talk to the homeless for a little bit, bring them dinner, something that'll help them kind of spark that sort of assertive nature.
Yeah.
I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, future for us, solving all the problems. Sage, why don't you solve racism? That's a great question, though. Training on passive, right? Passive aggressive. I think getting aware, right, is like we're saying, oh, Seattle's so passive, but what's the solution to it? And it's having these conversations, writing about it, talking about your teams, because I understand where you're coming from. I'm from Hawaii, but I guess we're direct, but we like to have conversations more so. I have friends from New York, Denise here, she's Afro-Latina from New York, and some people say she's aggressive, and that's not it. It's not being about aggressive. I think how to change community culture is a really big one. And for future for us, it's all about being open. If you come to our events, you get greeted at the door. I usually have everybody introduce themselves to each other. And for us, it's like what we do is that we analyze, okay, if you are told that you're being too aggressive, ask questions. Like, how am I coming off to you? Why am I being, like, what is your definition of being aggressive? It's always prompting questions. It's hard to not take it personally. I personally understand that. But also asking the questions. The community level, I can do only so much, but I do think it's a big conversation about consulting and bringing that out. There is a lot of great unconscious bias training that I highly recommend. And there's diversity, equity, inclusion work as well. So that's something that we're being a part of. Hopefully that answered your question, but there's a big problem with that. How do we address the societal issues here in Seattle? I think it's new transplants like us and working with the communities here to ask what do they truly want. Because we come here to their place, to this land, to this community, thinking that we have all these great ideas, but we don't know the history with Seattle. And it's really bridging the gap with that and then coming up with collective solutions. I think that's a big one. But yeah, I think we're good to go. Thank you so much for making me here, guys.